Hello fans, Rick Tyler here. Following on from the videos we did earlier this week, today's video I'm going to be covering the Topkit Roost, the components make it up and how that works. Before I go on to that, I just had one question following the feedback I had on a previous video about setting up the bait waiter or support systems for poor weather on the right hand side. And my recommendation is, if you need bait on the right hand side, ground bait on the right side, which is definitely advantageous if you want to be throwing it in with the right hand, I actually recommend using the actual standard bait waiter. You can see there I've got ground bait. I can even fit the trays in, but because that will fit on a lead, and that, just like I showed you last week, I can set that up, and that's nice and neat. In this setup, I've obviously got it on a post and a leg, because I'm only using a short leg. If I had a standard river leg, it'd just go straight onto any 25mm round leg. So it doesn't have to be an Octbox, it can be any seat box with a 25mm round leg. And then when I want to get off the box, I just literally swivel it out the way. So that's that covered. What we'll do now is we'll go on to the Topkit set components in detail. Right, this is the Topkit set, very robust, without doubt the strongest Topkit set on the market. Can support top 5s, top 6s without any system at the front. Some key features: the front and rear are supported with square posts, which means that these two parts will always be parallel to each other. They can be adjusted in distance, and they go further apart than most Topkit sets, because if you're putting rods on, you've normally got a rod butt and a reel, and you need the reel to be enough room to get the butt and the reel in without the reel landing on top of your front support. At the rear, we've got rubber sockets that are designed to take rod butts, and then there's a set of 6 inserts that are supplied that you choose which sockets you're going to put them in. And one thing to remember is, if you're using a reel, you have to take the rod, the reel handle will take the next slot out of commission. And so generally I'll have a bank for rods, and I'll have probably 2 banks of Topkits, but that's for you to work out how you want to set it up. And you can see here, particularly on windy days, if you haven't got anything that goes into the Topkit set, the wind vibrates the Topkit sets. And what ends up happening is they vibrate out, but you can see there, even without the front support on, that is quite clearly supporting that quite nicely. It just goes on the inside. Obviously that's normally then supported at the front, but it stops it coming out in the wind. And the last thing you want is an expensive piece of carbon coming out the back and then sitting like a seesaw. So what I'll do now is, I've removed the front section, we'll remove the bar, and we'll talk about the support arm that allows you to set it up at different angles. And you can see here, if I take this apart, you can see why it's so strong. There's no plastic involved here. That is a metal disc with holes, with another metal disc and a pin. And there's 2 slot together at different angles to set your Roost kit relevant to the bank that you're fishing at the time. Because if you're just fishing out of the water, you'll get away with it being horizontal. But if you're fishing with a steep obstacle like a big bramble bush to your left, you need to have a steep angle to clear it. So what I'll do now is I'll set it back up again, and then I'll talk about where you're going to put this on the box, because there's some things you've got to take into account. You've got to set it up in a manner where it's not going to impede the shipping back of your pole or landing net handle. And on the back cast, there can be no risk of your back cast catching it. At the same time, if you're fishing on something like a towpath or anything like that, you don't want to be setting your Topkit setup in any way that impedes the public or puts them at risk. So where we've got the Topkit set up again, if I remove this bag out of the way. Now, type of bait weighter that you're going to use. If you're using a mini bait weighter, like we discussed earlier in the week, like the basic one, where I can literally set it up on one leg only, and I'm leaving the front or the rear leg free, then I can put that nicely on the rear, no problem whatsoever. Very convenient. If, however, I'm using a larger bait weighter like the XL bait weighter that's taken all of this room up, what I must do is have some sort of extension on the back that allows me to set the Topkit set further to the rear. You can imagine that if the Topkit set's ending at the back leg, that's where, sorry, the bait weighter is ending at the back leg, that's where the Topkit set, because anything closer, what's going to end up happening there is I now have to rotate this Topkit set further and further to the rear so that it clears the table. Now it's in the way of my landing net handle going back. So if this was a landing net handle, you can see now that's not going to work. So there's a few tips on setup. And the final thing I'm just going to talk about is when it comes time to pack it up, it takes 2 seconds to pack up. If you've got the Octbox standard hold all, it's very quick to pack up, because when it breaks down, you are literally talking 4 components. And what I always do is I'll take the front and I'll slot the 2 together so it slots around the spigots. That simply then goes straight into the bag first. That's the first time, and that sits nice on the bottom, and then the other 2 bars can sit nice on top of that, and then my feeder arm can then go straight on top of that. Yeah. So that's the Topkit set. Hopefully that's given you some thoughts on how you'd set it up on your box, and I look forward to your feedback. Until the next video, tight lines.